We've got some pictures from what was actually one of the biggest stories in Irish sport last night. So Stephen Cluxton, who is not playing with the Dubs at the moment, he has stepped away. He hasn't retired. They were the things that Desi said last night. And here he is playing number 6, a Division 3 league game for Parnells last night.
John Small's replacement is what I'm seeing here. Get him outfield, get him in the team, get Comerford and Cluxton in the team. Can he fit them both in the team? It's like Matt Doherty and Seamus Cullen all over again. Actually, he looks in pretty good shape there. He looks like a man who's ready to answer his county's call. I
don't really understand what's happening. Like, a few scenarios, he hasn't made his mind up if he's ready to retire or not, or if he's taking a break this year or not. Probably in that instance, you think it's time to tell the management what your plans are, or go back in and train with the team if you do intend to play this year. Can they drop Evan Comerford now for somebody who hasn't been with the squad up until this point? In previous years, I mean, I don't know the date that he would have returned in previous years, but in previous years you would have expected him, you would have seen that he would have been around the squad for the league games, and so therefore there was always that month between the end of the league and the start of the championship where everything gets bedded back down. Paddy Andrews was making the point he's still the best goalkeeper, so maybe you just pick the best players and everybody in the squad understands that, and he has been given this extra time away. And I don't know, you try and tease out what the possibilities are, and is he working up to try and get back the desire to go through what he has to go through to win another All-Ireland for the Dubs? Like, the Meath game is, it's hurtling towards us at this point.
Like, am I right in saying Jack McCaffrey went back playing with Clontarf last year when he was when he stepped away, or maybe even when he stepped away initially? Like, people tend to go and try and find that joy with the club, and maybe Cluxton's going through the exact same thing, but I'd agree that it is still extremely strange, and seeing him play for the club just kind of makes it stranger.
So why not just say, look, I'm gone for the year, so that there's clarity. And one possibility is that he has said this to the Dubs, and the Dubs are playing some kind of long game with us, so the rest of the country doesn't feel like, yeah, Stephen Cluxton's gone, let's go, let's go, let's go. But
it's quite defeatist, or it's quite not in keeping. Like, the Dubs shouldn't necessarily
I don't believe that's the case.
That.
I don't believe that's the case at all. Like, it's a theory, right? And I mean, until there's absolute clarity what's going on, like, is it fair to criticise Cluxton after everything he's done for not knowing what his mind is at this point? I mean, I can understand him not knowing what his mind is, but the knock-on impact on the team is that there's uncertainty. Now, Paddy Andrews did say on the podcast that the players are used to players coming and going, and there's no uncertainty because the next man up is like, well, it's my turn. And he didn't say that, but that was kind of the sense that you got from it. Like, Jim would come in, announce that such and such a player was taking a year out. I'd forgotten about Roy O'Carroll, so Roy O'Carroll stepped away, and like they worked around it. The difference with this is that Cluxton is so important in so many different ways, and it did seem as if, in terms of the kickouts, the way Paddy was talking, that he's the one who is coming up with everything that happens, that it's his giant football brain which is deciding, okay, this is what we're going to do when the opposition attacks us this way. That it wasn't some kind of master plan handed down and that they then implemented. It was coming from him, so.
That adds to it as well, the kind of importance that he would bring to the team right now, and that, like, once he steps away, I think there's an appreciable difference between Dublin with Cluxton and without him, and it is a setback for them. Like, for me, if I had to take a stab at what the exact scenario is, I think he might just be taking a break for this year and hasn't said if he's retired. But still, that is getting muddied in the message that is being given out there, because...
Yeah, so I'm gone for the season.
Yeah, that isn't the message that we're getting, or has been delivered publicly from Dublin. So is that the message that he's given? Maybe not. And if you're to take everything that's been said at face value, and, like, why shouldn't we? Because, like, I mean, they've been asked about it clearly time after time after time. There is no... I don't buy there being a benefit in Dublin deliberately muddying the waters here. And I think that what Desi Farrell is essentially saying after last week is that Cluxton is muddying the waters, like, that he's the one who hasn't come up with a final decision. He's the one who hasn't fully committed that he's not in, or he's not fully out.
Yeah, and I don't think it's wrong to ask him to be clear about that. If you're the management of the Dublin senior team, obviously you've got a relationship with an icon, and you need to manage that for his friends in the panel, for the people who respect him on the panel, and for the work that he's done. But the whole, like, he doesn't owe anybody anything, he doesn't have to tell anybody his own mind. You actually do. Isn't that the whole point about the team? Isn't that the whole point about leaving the jersey in a better place, is that you're not bigger than the jersey? You keep it safe for whoever's coming after you. But the bit where you're like 1 foot out and 1 foot in, I'm just not sure that that's in keeping with everything that we've seen from the Jim Gavin era. Or certainly, maybe that stuff that they talked about was less important than the reality of the scenarios where the best players could step out and could step back in because they needed them. And there are different rules for players who are at that absolute...
Like Connolly.
Exactly. And that was displayed. Like, he left and came back. They said, and in fairness to Desi, he did say we've always had an open door policy, and Jim Gavin said we've always had an open door policy. That policy really only seemed to be open door for the very best players. Like, you know, squad players didn't seem to get the opportunity to opt out and then opt back in a little bit later in the year, but the players that they wanted and needed to win in All-Ireland, and that's, like, it's elite sport, so you understand why the rules get bent in those circumstances.
Yeah, like, I don't think anybody's critical of Cluxton maybe needing a break, or if he wanted to take a break. Like, that is...
Not at all. That's the opposite
difference there.
of what we're saying, yeah.
And I think people are maybe taking it up like that. The issue is the communication that is allegedly being given, or that has been delivered to the Dublin camp, because that's what's being communicated then outside. Like,
yeah.
If people are saying that Dessie Farrell is trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, like, I don't think that reflects well on Dessie Farrell, and I think people need to understand that if that's what you're suggesting, you're actually kind of levelling something at Dessie Farrell there.
No, and again, to go back to the football pod with Paddy and Andy, Paddy Andrews says, you know, Dessie is a straight shooter, and that has been the case.
He has, in fairness. Like, I mean, and in fairness, so is Jim Gavin. Like, I mean, you would need to come prepared to a press conference or to a post-match conversation with Jim Gavin or to Dessie Farrell. You need to ask the right questions. Dessie Farrell's being asked very direct questions. Mick Galvin was being asked very direct questions over the last couple of months. Is Stephen Cluxton in the squad? And what they're getting back is a very unclear answer. So to me, Dessie Farrell is dealing with a very unclear situation himself, because otherwise, I just don't see the benefit in him deliberately doing that.
In retrospect, looking back at this week's power rankings, I feel like we did not reflect enough the stepping away / potential retirement of the most important player in Gaelic football history, which is how we have talked about Stephen Cluxton. So, I just want to briefly revisit this. The greatest, most important, most influential footballer ever leaves a panel, and it has no material impact on the power rankings. I think, in retrospect, and I'm not starting an argument here, right? But in retrospect, I don't think we put enough store in this. Again, listen to the podcast, right? He was talking about the Tyrone game. Do you remember the first kick out of the Tyrone game? The Tyrone game where Tyrone were going to do this, and he just looked up and eggs his head over the entire press, and Dublin have won the game. In the first minute, or that first kick out, Dublin win the game. Like, it's game over. Tyrone crumbled psychologically in the face of that. I think it's important, Owen. I think it's important that he's gone.
One counterpoint to that, they've gone through the league campaign without him, not looking good, not looking at their best, and they're still joint champions of the league. The heirs apparent couldn't beat them in Thurles. The heirs apparent need to beat them in Croke Park.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think Kerry in Thurles, Kerry in Croke Park, Kerry are better in Croke Park. Like,
so Dublin are way better in
Croke
Park.
They are, but I'm not... that is the league game. As we know, the last time they played in the championship, Cluxton again was a match winner and hugely important. Tommy Rooney is with us. Tommy, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How you doing?
I think that we haven't made enough of a big deal. I think because it's slipping away piecemeal at the end here, that Cluxton not playing for Dublin this season, which now looks more likely than not, is a much bigger deal than we've actually read into.
Ger, the podcast for the Football Pod has gone up already, but you can't see my face during it. And during my face, the realisation dawns on me throughout that Meath have a chance now. Stephen Cluxton's gone. I'm only joking. Meath don't necessarily have a chance.
Well, hang on. Sorry, no.
This is the opportunity.
Okay, but that's like what you're saying is what a lot of people feel, because Cluxton is gone. There is an aura around the team that wins 6 in a row, that's going for 7 in a row. And a large portion of it comes from the identity of the goalkeeper and the public face that he has put forward. A large portion of it. Again, we don't know exactly. Maybe Fenton and Howard and McCarthy decide that this is the moment that they become, certainly McCarthy and Fenton become, even higher up that conversation for all-time greatest footballers, because they're right there in it, and they win All Ireland this year. And as Andy says in the clip, this is the greatest achievement. Is that the clip that we're about to play now? Or should I play that instead of paraphrasing him?
Yeah. Well, let's play it, yeah. So it's Andy and Paddy. So Paddy kind of is talking about Dublin actually being in transition. I put it to him that Stephen Cluxton's All-Ireland medals are the 76th that have departed the Dublin dressing room in the last 18 months. I am including Kevin McMiniman in there because there was a report in the Irish news that he's now gone to Tokyo with the Irish boxing squad and he won't be back until mid-August. So 76 All-Ireland medals, Ger. Here's Paddy Andrews on episode 9 of the Football Pod.
So, transition can be lost and it kind of can be an excuse for certain teams or in other sports, and say, they're in transition, give them time. Dublin aren't looking for time. Dessie Farrell's not looking for time. The young players aren't looking for time. They're looking to win the All-Ireland again. So that won't be an excuse. But if you look at the player turnover, of course, like you say, maybe 76 All-Ireland medals, that's a hell of a lot. But they're still going to expect to win the All-Ireland this year. That's going to be the goal.
I think if Dessie manages to win the All-Ireland this year, I think it's some achievement. I have to say, I think they're going to be there with McCarthy, Conn, Kilkenny, Scully, these guys, Cooper.
Fenton.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, that talent is still amazing. But the Jack McCaffrey thing now and Paul Mannion thing becomes big because Cluxton is gone. It becomes a bigger issue now that they're gone. Because Evan, however good he is, Evan Comerford isn't going to be as influential as Stephen Cluxton, in my opinion. Okay, if Johnny Cooper hasn't played much football this year, McMahon is good, but he's not as good as Johnny Cooper, in my opinion. McDaid did exceptionally well last year, was never pressed. He cannot do what Jack McCaffrey did in 2019. So
he's also injured.
He's also injured, but my point is, Lahith and Byrne and these guys are good players, but they were replacing other players with Scully, O'Callaghan, Kilkenny. Now, if the opposition can't smell blood this year, if they can't smell, we're as well pack it in, because there is, all of a sudden, there is a chance. I know it's not even the loss of Stephen Cluxton as much, in my opinion. It's what that, I suppose, you start thinking then, okay, they have lost the book on the screen, but they have lost.
I might even put in this category.
No, I know. I'm saying, but Paddy, you coming off the bench with Kevin McMiniman and these guys, you always had to come up with a plan. When Macaulay came off the bench in midfield, that was you had to have a different plan. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a plan for Howard. Do you know what I'm saying? They were big players. Proved it last year, really good player, and I know he's injured now. But when Jack McCaffrey was playing, you literally had to put a player, American Jack McCaffrey. And that is just huge. And now with Stephen Cluxton, Eva Comerford, even if Comerford's kickouts are as good as Cluxton's, every team is taking a step forward there. They're taking a step forward.
That's a good point. I really like that closing point, actually, Tommy. I think that teams might actually enter into engagement with Dublin with less paranoia, quite frankly. And that comes down to McCaffrey as well. He's bang on there about having to man Markham. People do weird things against great players. Kerry put Gavin White on McCaffrey in the 19 drawn final, and it was a complete disaster. That's just one tiny example. Mayo have done a number of different things like that to try and quell the influence of whether it's Diarmuid Connolly or Kieran Kilkenny down through the years. Kilkenny obviously still there, and maybe there are a number of those Kilkennys that exist in that team where you still have to have a special array of options to try and mute that threat, and maybe that still makes teams paranoid. But maybe just the fewer threats means that teams can play their own game a little bit more, and we end up seeing a greater volume of contests that Dublin actually have to engage in throughout the season, rather than maybe 1 or 2 games in a year. And I think that comes full circle back to Sunday week, which I think is now a really important moment in the lifespan of this Dublin team, because if they beat Meath like they beat them last year, I actually think that goes a long way to answering a lot of the questions.
100%. And when you think back on that Leinster final last year, one of the moments that stands out is that Con O'Callaghan goal that comes from the Cluxton kick-out. It's such a simple move. It looked like a training ground move. and Dublin just completely broke Meath with that. In that moment, you had 3 or 4 players following the wrong men. Con O'Callaghan gets in loads of space, and it leads to the rock goal. I went back and watched the 2019 league match that Comerford played, because he was under a bit of pressure that day, and I don't know whether that was a waste of my own time, but like Kerry got 1-4 direct off Evan Comerford that night. I know that he's probably grown since then and he's had time with Stephen Cluxton to learn his trade, but it has to mean something, Owen. It has to mean something when that amount of players are gone. They don't have that aura on the bench anymore. Paddy Andrews was talking a couple of weeks ago about the severity of their A versus B games and the strength and depth. They've been all the conversations we've been having over the last number of weeks. But like, if Dean Rock wasn't coming off the bench at the weekend for Dublin against Wexford, like, who were their other clutch players to come off the bench? I know he wasn't necessarily needed, but like, who else is there to come on if Cormac Costello isn't having a great day? Like, Robbie McDade is now gone. He's now injured. I'd be interested to see who's going to line out at 6 and 7 against Meath. Obviously, they can slip in McCarthy. They've brought in the Hiff, Padder Coffey Byrne, but those 2 boys aren't proven yet.
They're learning
they
on
really
the job,
aren't.
yeah.
They're learning on the job. And like, as Andy said, if teams can't smell blood, if they can't smell blood, we may as well give up.
Yeah, I agree. I actually totally agree that this will be a desperate reflection on the rest of the championship if a greater effort against Dublin isn't put up this year. If something closer, and that's not like that. That's nothing against the Dubs. It is against everyone else. Everyone else now needs to up their game. This narrative that sometimes is out there, being like, stop criticising the Dubs. Everybody else needs to take some responsibility. I think that is doubly true this year. Everybody else needs to take that responsibility.
Are we falling into our annual trap of trying to talk ourselves into something, or is all the evidence there? Is the 700 medals that you've talked about disappearing from the panel, is that important, more important than in previous years?
It's like, it doesn't sound like a believable number. Like, it's an outrageous amount, and it's like, the lads talked about it as well on the podcast, how Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion stepping away now is so much bigger.
Well,
it's so much bigger because they got away with it,
and they're in the peak of their career. And like, you know, it's a footballer of the year. Did Mannion ever make footballer of the year? Was he on a short list? He was certainly. You wouldn't have been terribly surprised if he had been on a short list a couple of times.
And 19, and like that's the key thing. It was at the end he leaves at his peak, I would argue. Like, that's 2019 season he had was absolutely unreal. That night when he was kicking points from the sideline against Mayo. Well, not really the sidelines, you're not allowed to shoot from there.
Just like, while you were chatting there, I've looked up the semi-final against Tyrone in 2017, and Tyrone started the game really well, very aggressive. Everybody's up, everybody knows exactly what it is, and it's a brilliant team they have. Sean Kavanagh kicks the first free from inside the 21 after there was a beautiful through ball, and a Dublin scramble defence gets back and prevents it from being through on goals. And then Cluxton put the ball down and finds Scully on essentially not the other midfield line in the Tyrone half, essentially. That's where the kick out lands. And it goes straight to Scully, and the whole Tyrone press is beaten, and the game finishes 2-17 to 11 points. But I think that's the minute. That one instance is so important because all of Tyrone's plans are, we're gonna get in his face, this is gonna be great, we're gonna have the numbers written, and it's like, no, I don't care. I've seen this movie, and I know where Scully is. I know that in the 4.5 seconds it takes the ball to travel this amount of time, he's going to be arriving at that spot, and he essentially catches it uncontested, and it's game over because he's got that ability to do it. Who was it saying that they don't think that Dublin work that much on kick-outs? It's all in Cluxton's mind, where he says, you be at this point and I'll find you.
Kyle Coney was saying that this week.
Yeah.
Coney was saying it, but like,
I mean, obviously they work for hours and hours and hours and hours on the kick-out, which gives them that ability on the day to call plays from a playbook which is like really dense, except almost notional.
There's been a quote attributed to Evan Comfort from DCU this week that he used to tell his teammates, just move and I'll find you. So that would be in keeping with the Stephen Cluxton way of thinking. But the lads went in depth on the fact that it wasn't that Cluxton was infallible. He was fallible. He'd make mistakes. Andy spoke about freaking him out in 2015 in the All-Ireland semi-finals. It was just that he figured everything out. Whatever you put in front of him, Cluxton found a way of figuring it out. And Dublin obviously had the players in the field to do it that day. Like, one of the big things from it the weekend, like Brian Howard stepping up was massive, because I don't think Howard has stepped up ever since Jim McConnelly said, keep an eye on this guy a couple of years ago. He's had moments. He's had days when he looks like he could be one of the best footballers in the country. But last year, I think it was a massive blow that Brian Howard didn't do enough to start for Dublin. That massive blow. What am I talking about? They won the All-Ireland. But like, they need Brian Howard to step up. They need the likes of Sean Bugler to really take a grasp of this team now. Like, obviously, Conn, Kilkenny, Fenton, McCarthy, they're all going to do that, no problem. But I would argue that they need Brian Howard and they need Bugler and Scully to keep their hold on this team at the minute.
Okay, so what's the Dublin Meath score going to be?
Oh, Jesus. I'm not falling into that trap again. Now. Give me another 4 days. Give me 4 more days.
We should do it a daily thing, a daily update on what you think the scoreline is, because this will be a fluctuating thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Come on, give me the spread is 12 points. 12-point spread. No way.
They'll cover that, Tommy, will they?
Surely Meath are going to score a goal, lads. Like, they have to score a goal. Like, Killian O'Sullivan was very close last year to ripping the back of the net in the first 2 minutes. Like, if they score a goal and we get 20 minutes out of it, I don't even care about half-time, because we kept it up as the 4 points 2 years ago at half-time. We just hadn't scored ourselves. So.
We're getting sucked into the emotion and the psychodrama, but Dublin are 50-1 on to beat Meath.
They'll definitely beat Meath. And
I think
we know the Ulster Pilots, they're cold, rational people, and they're looking at this going, yeah, but look at the Dublin team still.
Yeah, exactly. Like, look at the players we've named there: Conn, Kilkenny, Fenton, Howard, Bugler, Scully. Not even touching on the defenders there.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
And they were really good defensively. They were really good defensively against Wexford. I know they were sloppy. I know that they made mistakes going forward, and Howard and McCarthy were putting the ball over the line, and Costello picked the ball off the ground and missed frees.
Okay.
But defensively, they restricted Wexford to very little.
Okay. All right. Tommy, good stuff. The podcast is available now. Yep.
It is indeed, yeah.
Okay, good stuff. That's the bit where you give us the hard sell.
Podcast. Oh yeah, it's in the OTB Sports app. It's
practiced.
It's in wherever you get your podcast.
Great chemistry.
Mm.
You can get it in the OTB GA stream itself, where you get all of the interviews, and you can also get it in its own podcast channel.
Subscribe, rate, like, share. Thanks very much. That's Tommy Rooney, one of the 3 stars. I've noticed the artwork is like the 3 lads in action. You know, Andy Moore, Footballer of the Year, 25-time All-Ireland winner, Paddy Andrews, and Tommy in action. I mean, that was. I don't want to say his ego has exploded, but like.
When you get fan art after one episode, you know you're doing something right.
The way you said that there, it sounded a bit different. 11 minutes past 8 on OTB AM. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you.